one of our source books for tonight. Tonight's narration on 29 years of the NDC. We're going to give you a solid narration. Well, we think it's solid. We don't know what you think about it. They're solid because it's comprehensive. It's very, very comprehensive. We've dug into all our political science researchers to bring us the best out of what has happened in the NDC over the last 29 years. It's our own exclusive intellectual property rendition of the history of the National Democratic Congress. If you look at our flyer, we call it the story behind the history. That's what we're going to tell you tonight. So if you know an NDC person, wake him up, tell them to drive home quickly, and hear the story of their party reported by a journalist who has been following the party. This is the next book that we'll be referring to and applying it also to the narration that will be given. It's entitled In the Service of Democracy, is by Justice D.F. Annan. And it's a book actually written posthumously after Justice Annan unfortunately passed. We do know Justice Annan, the venerable Speaker of Parliament, two-time Speaker of the Fourth Republic. The first Parliament and the second Parliament were both led by Justice Annan. It's a book that's written by also two important writers and political scientists, Nana Ato-Dadzie and Professor Kwame Ahoy. The two of them put this volume together. Justice Annan talks about all the details, including how they went around the country asking people whether they wanted to democratize, the beginnings of the formation of the National Democratic Congress, which we are celebrating today as the biggest opposition party, 29 years in existence. As a opposition party that is primed to take over the reins of government in 2024's elections. Okay, now this is the last one, of course. This is a controversial one, which came up before the election, Working with Rawlings, is by Kwame Ahoy, and Mr. Ahoy himself plays a big role in the narration that we're giving you tonight. One of the video inserts that we'll be showing you is an insert by Mr. Ahoy. So that's coming up now. So what's the time now? It's 9:20. So by 9:35, we will begin the NDC narration on the touchscreen with our videos, and we have decorated a nice logo. We have done a logo, 29 years of the NDC. We'll put up, and of course, we'll put the NDC anthem behind it. You know, it's our favorite stuff. We will not mention Asidun Katia, but maybe we'll refer to him. So wait for that. That's coming up. I said what? It's now 9:20. By 9:35, I'm going on to the touchscreen. I'll be done in 15 minutes with the Atifa story, and then we can go through the NDC story. That's our main part. When we are done with that, we'll go to the phone lines and to Sputnik and to tell you what the Ministry of Health is saying. We'll tell you the two positions that have been advanced by the media that is investigating allegations of corruption, and the Ministry of Health that is standing its ground that there's no corruption in the purchase of vaccines from Russia, even though they have gone through middlemen. The ministry stands that there's no corruption, and they insist that no money has been spent and no money will be spent inappropriately to get Ghanaians the vaccine. We'll give you the two positions. When we open the phone lines, we'll ask you which position do you stand by. Okay. So that's our introduction for tonight. This is Good Evening Ghana. It's live from Metro TV. Join us. It's going to be a great show tonight. It's a show that will take you throughout the weekend. Okay, so let's get to understand. Those of you who are hearing the story for the first time. Professor Ken Atifa is in some trouble. He is the Executive Secretary of the National Identification Authority, the government agency that does the ID card, procures the ID card for you and I. He's reported to have said in a radio interview that in terms of recruiting people, because there's been a recruitment published by the NIA, and it has occasioned the movement of many men, young men and women, to the NIA looking for jobs. You know that in our country, the big story is about jobs. So a lot of people are looking for jobs over there. During a radio interview, Ken Atifa is reported to have said something that infuriated party people. We're going to begin the commentary by showing you that radio interview in which Professor Atifa, the Venerable, attended, and then we will show you the reaction of Kennedy Japan. We'll come on the touch screen and read what Gabriel Chidako is saying. MPP people, pay attention. This is your story before the NDC story. Here is Ken Atifa speaking in a radio studio.
The President, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, or charge me say I should make sure no party executives are hired in the process. On Pese Obeja legacy bia, a kunkwasi a fat party for any ogu imo. Or Pese building a neutral public service. Neutrality is one of the principles of public service and political neutrality. Entino ye de emra. And also make us neutrality. Now,
damage control to save the president. So, customer party for me. I'm telling media be kind of crash. If you wanna maybe operate with the assumptions, go cancel crown because I don't know that or uncomfortable working with party people. Said your name is and somewhere as someone said was here candia to papanos. And after party already know your statement is paving way for group easily. Maminka, who bought to the Kosa Kutre, Usimami Moba. I have to let him know. I have to let Baumia know. Papa is causing damage to him. Because he said the best man. And he a man. Now, we best man is already chief of staff. Send you about permanent people. Obia. I have some Sabbath on Obia. So, you know what? Free no one. Your Bama woman revenge. Sir,
the president, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, or charge me say I should make sure no party executives are hired in the process. On pese obeja legacy bia ekunkwasi a party for any ogu imo. Or pese you building a neutral public service. Sir, neutrality is one of the principles of public service and political neutrality. Entino ye de emra. Yenye. I know so make us from penny for neutrality. Now,
damage control to save the president. Say, or customer party for BT. I'm telling media be kind of crash. If you wanna maybe operate with the assumptions, go cancel crown because I don't know that or uncomfortable working with party people. Said your name is and somewhere, as someone said, was here candia to papanos. And after party already know your statement is paving way for group easily. Maminka, who bought to the Kosa Kutre, Usimami Moba. I have to let him know. I have to let Baumia know. Papa is causing damage to him. Because he said the best man. And he a man. Now, we best man is already chief of staff. Send you about permanent people. Obia. I have some Sabbath on Obia. So, you know what? Free no one. Your Bama woman revenge.
Okay, so you heard that. That was Kennedy, Japan, who was damning Ken Atefa for saying that. But this article by Gabriel Chidak, we think that it sort of explains the matter in a certain way, and we want to walk you through it, you know, and then when we walk you through it, you can take your own decision. This is NPP Insiders. I asked you to pay attention to this. So let's go and read what Gabriel Chidak wrote. So he says that we should go easy on Kenneth Ajiman Atefa. I don't know why he uses his full name, but let's go on. He clearly could have phrased his words intelligently and with basic sensitivity. He had no business stamping his feet on the expectations and hopes of unemployed party loyalists with such reckless callosity. Gabi says that what Atefa did is reckless callosity. Okay, let's move on and see what else he says. Very unwise, he says, and some may even say selfish, considering that he lost this same job when MPP lost in 2008, only to regain it after MPP regained office. At least his memory and self-benefit ought to have even guided his tongue and stopped him from speaking out of turn. So Gabi's point here is that Atefa himself is a beneficiary of political movements at the top of the political echelons of Ghana's state. That when he had this job as NIA director, when the National Democratic Congress won office in 2009, they took him out because he was believed to be an MPP person. They brought other people in. He regained the job 8 years later when the MPP came into office. So on that basis alone, Professor Atefa should have perhaps been more sensitive to some of these party loyalists who came around looking for jobs on the basis that they are MPP party loyalists. But let's go on. Gabi says a lot more than that. Okay. My good friend Ken, referring, I believe, to Kenneth Japan, should check his excitement levels when he has audience. No, sorry, he's still referring to Ken Atefa. He says, my good friend Ken should check his excitement levels when he has an audience. It helps. The bad way he said what he actually meant to say is what had caused this whole controversy. I do not think he meant it as it came out. Surely, he couldn't have, and I know so to be the case. His loyalty to the party and party members has never been in doubt, but he is also a true patriot, a Ghanaian always eager to serve his nation. That's good for Ken Atefa, by the way, but surely Kennedy Japan does not agree with that, because Gabi Ochodaku is saying that from what he knows of Atefa, he's a true party person, but he's also a nationalist, he's also a patriot, and he's always eager to serve his nation. He's already said that what he said was said with reckless callosity, but he now says that Ken Atefa is otherwise a cool guy, you know. So please be kind to him. NPP people. Okay, in this case, he jammed a foot in his mouth and shot from the hip when the nozzle was aimed at his own family jewels, so to speak. He must apologize and let's move on. Now here, Mr. Tredako is making a call onto Ken Atefa. It's almost like an instruction that, my brother, you have erred in this matter. The way you spoke very badly. You must apologize. We don't know whether you agree with him or not. This is not our view, by the way. This is not the views of Good Evening Ghana. We are only sharing with you the views of Gabi Tredako, a key member of the NPP administration, or NPP party, I should say. This is really a party matter, and we are sharing it because Ken Atefa has said something. Kennedy Japan, who cannot be ignored in the MPP, has also said something, and he's very, very angry. So this seems like the middle way, and we are just giving you all the opinions there is. If you want to know what my personal opinion is, when we meet at the weekend, I don't know where you're watching the Euro 2021, but when we meet, when we are watching it, you can ask me that. For now, it's not for my personal opinion. My personal opinion comes in the next segment when we deal with the NDC matter. Okay. All right. Gabi goes on. He says, use this as a measure. Do you actually believe Akufo-Addo will tell him or anybody in his capacity to employ, quote, no party executive, unquote? I mean, how? Gabi says. Those engaged nationwide to do NIA registration, are there no MPP polling station executives among them? Again, I doubt if in reality the NIA staff role under Ken Atefa doesn't even have an MPP bias. Gabi is being brutally frank and honest here. He's making the point that, look, Akufo-Addo can never tell Ken Atefa to do this. It's not possible that Akufo-Addo will say that. But in any case, the people who are really working at NIA now, there are MPP people there. The NIA people who are working across the nation, there are MPP people from the polling stations who are working for the NIA over there. They are working for the NIA as a state organization. They got there with their certificates, but also because they are MPP people. That is the reality of the situation. We know in Ghana, toilets change when party changes. It's not just in Ghana. It happens in America as well. Washington, D.C. has completely changed because the Democrats are in power. The Republicans have gone. The Democrats have come. That's one of the demerits of party politics that we learned in school. But there are merits of party politics. For any social science phenomenon, there are demerits and there are merits. So you can call this one of the demerits. But I like what Gabi is saying because he's being brutally frank. That the truth of the matter is that there are MPP people in there. So it's not possible that Akufo-Addo would even say that. It's illogical. And he believes that Akufo-Addo never told Ken Atefa what Atefa says Akufo-Addo told him. Okay. This one, it says, but the principle must not be lost on us at all. Recruitment must not be based on party lines. You are a loyal citizen and competent, and that must matter. It is important Ghanaians believe this to be the case. Aside NPP and NDC, there are millions of Ghanaians who may not be loyalists of any party. So, where do they stand in our democracy if a party card is what guarantees one's employment in a public institution? That's an age-old question. So we are now talking about, Gabi is saying that however that the undertones of employment in such institutions are partisan, meritocracy must always become part and parcel of the way in which we recruit people. Because at the end of the day, he says, there are Ghanaians who are neither NDC or they are NPP. Just this evening, Metro TV has completed a broadcast, the people we took over from, of the CPP guys who are broadcasting their CPP stuff. So they are CPP people, and they don't have a member of parliament. It's only NDC and MPP, but that's changing. Hopefully that could change in 2024. So the point Gabi is making here, which I agree with him, is that let's find a way, a constructive way, and a deliberate way to bring meritocracy into the appointment of state institutions. Because with meritocracy, it will not matter your party color, but you can get in based on your competence, your strength, and your loyalty to your nation. That's what meritocracy is about. We must bring it in. For now, though, we cannot run away from the fact that the undertones or the underpinnings of these appointments are partisan, NDC, MPP all the time. But let's bring meritocracy in. He hints that that may be the point that Ken Atefa wanted to make. Atefa wanted to make the point that let's have a meritorious NIA with skilled people or people with the right skill set. Okay, let's move on. NPP should not fight this. NPP should rather see the positive spin in what he meant to say, which is that for this party, it is Ghana first. If you are good at what you do, and can be trusted to work in accordance with the mandates and direction of the government, and specifically the said institution, don't think only a party card can get you in. That's how we build a nation. So Gabi is saying that, let's Gabi Achudako statements. How many slides? 1, 2, 3. Okay, not that many. Beautifully written, though. Beautifully written. So it will be on video on demand. You can see it. I'll take a short break. When I come back, I'm ready for the narration on NDC shall lead. They say that development is their goal. What has been the story behind the history? 29 years old. After the break, this is Good Evening Ghana is live.
The average human body mass should have at least 60% water for optimal performance in any physical or mental exercise. We can help you maintain it naturally. X Natural Mineral Water. Simply natural.
Blood gives life. Life is very important. Let's donate blood to save lives. On Saturday, 19 June 2021, Ignite Media, Metro TV, Original TV, and Original FM is humbly inviting you to blood donation exercise. Come donate and save a life. The donation will take place at Metro TV's premises on Dr. Issa Street, close to Alisa Hotel at North Ridge in Accra. The blood donation exercise will start at 7 a.m. It is in commemoration of the World Blood Donation Day. Join us to save lives as we donate blood for the blood bank. This exercise is in partnership with Blue Skies, Pharma Nova, and 3Fair. Share blood to save a life.
For people like you.
Yenim say whoop football pa. And nothing a high sense as sponsor Euro 2020. Edia Maono. Nesa sunti na yatete TV so say who? Edia Maono. A high sense Euro 2020 TV super promo. Kahoe kwajo brand new high sense TV and ne board dafo. Pictures ne clear na color ne deep. Sound quality ne so dia one it here. High sense TV so dia entry power. About down one access you are. Akona uti sa abefo. 18th June, Akofim 11th July. A high sense Euro 2020 TV super promo. Emma Refisa high sense and Kwan Emma 5 years warranty. A high sense Euro 2020 TV super promo. Akoso wa high sense showrooms I want Ghana for Nanyina. What you dear Nansenya? High sense everyday prices for everyday people. High sense official sponsor at the Euro 2020.
Hey, so today, the National Democratic Congress, the NDC, is 29 years old. So we put this, this beautiful thing together for them. 29 years of NDC. Congratulations. What we're going to do now is a narration of the story behind the NDC's history of 29 years old. Congratulations, NDC. Let's go for our first NDC montage for tonight. From victory unto victory, they say the NDC shall lead.
Patron of the land, for when and seek your future, development our God, from vision to big, the NDC shall lead, Democrat, Ghana, our strength in unity, from vision to big, the NDC shall lead, Democrat, Ghana, our strength in unity.
Yes, Irene. So that's the story of the National Democratic Congress. So who is the National Democratic Congress? The NDC, National Democratic Congress. Who are they? What are they? How did they emerge? Who is the leader? We're going to give you the story behind the story. A short lineup of Ghana's political history until then was the agitation for independence that was won by the CPP, the left-wing party. And I say the left-wing party because I'll come back to that. From there, we drive through the CPP's leadership, a little bit of chaos here and there, the animosity between the CPP and the opposition at the time, which included bomb throwing in Kumasi, etc., all the way come back to the overthrow of Kwame Nkrumah in 1966, then to the new administration. Kwame Nkrumah banned from participating even though he was not dead. The new administration is the opposition to Nkrumah. They now come to power. Their famous leader, Dr. Dankwa, has passed, and so he has handed over the baton, or his leadership of the group is inherited by Prime Minister Kofi Abrefa-Buzia. The system of government at the time that was run meant that Ghana had what we call a bicephalous executive. Bicephalous, two executives. Monocephalous is the other one. A bicephalous executive, like what is run in London, in Britain means that you have a head of government, but he is not the head of state. You have a head of government in an individual and the head of state in another individual. That's a system that Ghana ran from 1951 until 1960 when the constitution was changed into a republican constitution, and we had a monocephalous executive in the person of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. So the bicephalous executive principle returned to Ghana in 1969. Professor Abrefa Buzia was the prime minister, head of government, elected by as a member of parliament and the leader of business in parliament, prime minister. And then Edward Akufo-Addo was elected by an electoral college, including members of parliament, to become the head of state. So the bicephalous executive was shared by the head of state, Edward Akufo-Addo, former Chief Justice of the Republic, and the head of government, Prime Minister Abrefa Buzia. In effect, more power in terms of decision-making and running the show lay with the Prime Minister. Less power lay with the head of state. The head of state was the ceremonial head of state, and so he will preside over. He will give the sessional address to Parliament. He will commission military officers. He will meet state guests, and he will speak at state dinners. He was the boss. But in fact, the real power lay with the Prime Minister, as it is in England. So that was the Second Republic. And so Dr. Nkrumah's opponents won the day. They won both the head of state and the head of executive. So their government was overthrown by Champon in early 1970, 71, I believe. On 13 January, it was overthrown, comes back all the way to the coup d'etat of Rawlings. And then the Third Republic. Third Republican election was won by the CPP people again. So the Nkrumahs reorganized themselves, and during the elections of 79, this is 8 years after Nkrumah dies, they win power again in Ghana, albeit a second round election, and they also win the elections in Parliament. Again, we have a monocephalous executive, so Dr. Hilary Mann becomes president of the Republic in 1979, sworn in on September 30th, 1979. So that continues until the return of Fly Lieutenant Rawlings in the coup d'etat 1981. Everybody woke up and bam, constitution has been overthrown again. JJ is back. JJ is still very popular. So JJ runs the show until 1988. Now I'm coming into the story. So in 1988, in fact, during the period that JJ was running the show, the global situation was the Cold War. The Cold War that at this time was being fought between Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan, mainly between Gorbachev and Reagan. Reagan and his allies, you can call it. So Reagan, Margaret Thatcher on one side, that's America and Britain, and then Gorbachev on the other side, supported by Cuba and a few of the islands and all of that. So this was the Cold War. It was being run. Ghana as a country had positioned itself in a sort of global middle. You know that the history of Ghana is that the non-aligned movement. Now, the non-aligned movement was formed by Kwame Nkrumah to indicate that after the Second World War, when the Cold War started, some countries decided they would be non-aligned to the Cold War because the Cold War was brutal. And it was fought not just as a main war, but it was also fought by proxy. So it was important for smaller countries to determine where they stood within the Cold War. If you didn't determine where you stood, the Cold War will swallow you. Dr. Nkrumah cleverly set up the non-aligned movement, and then it grew. And so Southeast Asian heads of state also supported the non-aligned movement. So Ghana was one of the African pivots of the non-aligned movement, and that was also fundamentally expressed in 1983 when Flight Lieutenant Rawlings, as leader of the coup d'etat that had occurred in 1981. Now, in those days, many coup d'etats will go to the left, and the rest will be, the democracy will be on the right. Not in all cases. So when we did the coup d'etat, we were thought of as a left-wing organization, and the PNDC began as a left-wing. So there are names that we can mention: Akatapori, Yen Yen, Zayebo, Akoto Ampao. I mean Akoto Ampao, the same Akoto Ampao, counsel to President Akufo-Addo is the same person I mentioned. Akoto Ampao was part of the socialist group of those who wanted the PNDC and the government of Ghana to become a left-wing administration. Then something dramatic happened in 1983. The government was broke. They were looking for money. And so they went to Russia and to the left-wing people. They didn't get any money. Rawlings was exacerbated. He wanted to keep his popularity with Ghanaians, but the country was broke. So he decided to submit himself to the IMF and the World Bank. In doing so, Rawlings had shifted from the left to the right. And so political scientists and economists call that of Ghana's economic direction. So they call it the 1983 U-turn. Now, the U-turn was attributed to some architects, fundamentally P.V. Obeng, Mr. Abbey of the Bank of Ghana, and others, but fundamentally P.V. Obeng and Abbey. they led the government away from the U-turn to the World Bank. I believe Chachuchi Carter was involved as well. And then they got some money from the World Bank. So that's how Ghana's economy turned. From that time, the right-wing forces of the world began to lead and control and manage Ghana's economy and Ghana's politics. So it was this process that led us into 1988, where the agitations from human rights activists like Professor Albert Dubois, Nana Akufo-Addo, Janice Selby, and others, came together. Kwabena Dakon, the poultry farmer, the agitations for human rights and the democracy and the call on Rawlings to hand over, and all of these matters started at this time because Ghana was in control. The right wing was in control of Ghana. Right-wing people heard these allegations. The people in France, the people in America, the people in UK heard these allegations. They began to support the pressure on the PNDC. So they began to tie the money they gave to the PNDC to the PNDC's commitment to democratize. This is how serious it was. So we will really never know whether the PNDC members, the key actors in the PNDC, Kojo Chikata, J.J. Rawlings, and General Arnold Quaino, and Eboteria, and all of those key actors in the PNDC, we will never know whether they actually wanted to democratize or that they were forced to democratize. It's not too clear. Be that as it may, there was a commission set up by Rawlings called the Justice D.F. Annan Commission. And we told you tonight that we looked at these books, and so that's in D.F. Annan's book. A lot is said about it. A commission set up called the Justice D.F. Annan Commission that was put together to go around the country to ask people whether they wanted democracy. I'm guessing that some of the members of the PNDC who didn't want the democracy actually were hoping that Ghanaians, because of their love for JJ, will say they don't want democracy. But the report came and it was an overwhelming support for democracy in 1988. So the PNDC was forced to begin the processes, and they started with the local government elections. So local government elections were conducted in 1988, non-partisan local government elections, because at that time, the ban on political parties was still in force. The ban on political parties was still in force to the point where, political parties couldn't operate. So that election was conducted non-partisan. And then came 1990. Constellations were still on. Professor Dubois was speaking, and Akufo-Addo and others. People had returned from exile. J. Ekufuor and co. They were putting themselves together, and they began to sense that the PNDC will give in to democracy to begin political parties again. So the opposition to PNDC, the Dankwa Buzia people, set up what they call the Dankwa Buzia Club. They used to meet in Mr. Kreku's house sometimes. They met in J. Ekufuor's house. They met in Nana Akufo-Addo's house. They met in Dansoman. J.H. Mensah also came back to come and join that group. So things were happening. The PNDC was clever, So they could see that, look, this democracy, we have to do it. So they set up people together and they wrote a constitution. So they set up what they call the Consultative Assembly, and they wrote a constitution. So from the time the Consultative Assembly wrote the constitution for the 1992 process, the democracy began. They set a timetable when they will allow political parties to contest for elections in 1992. So the constitution was written in 1991, and 1992 July, a referendum was conducted on the constitution. That referendum was heavily in favor of the constitution, and so now politics had come. Political parties had to start. The Dankwa Buzia people will come, the Nkrumahs will come. What was the actors of the PNDC going to do? Dr. Obeda Samoa gives us the clear analysis of how they treated that moment. Let's see it.
There was an argument within the PNDC as to whether we could just return the country to constitutional rule, or whether the PNDC should promote a political party. And I was one of the advocates of the PNDC promoting a political party. I'd always been against the idea of the military by themselves ruling. I advocated very strongly that we should try and set up a political party which will promote the values of the PNDC. I said it's not enough just to get out of office. We should, if you believe in what you are doing and you believe that those values were worth continuing, then we should set up a party that will continue those values. See, eventually it was agreed upon. So we started working. And again, I advised my colleagues, I said, look, the PPA had been there, they have a tradition. The CPP have been there, they have a tradition. They have a network. We don't have any. So let us set up a network before we lift the ban. You see? So at the time, so they said, okay, it's your idea. You go and set up the network. So I laid with the foundation for the party before the ban of political parties was lifted. So when it was lifted, we were ready to go. You see? So it took a lot of people by surprise. How a small party like that became so big, so quickly.
So you see how clever the NDC people were. Obeda, someone says that the UP had a tradition, the CPP had a tradition, they didn't have. So they needed to build one, and they built one. They built a very solid behemoth of a political party. So next, what I'm going to show you, and note it down, is the first Congress of the NDC. This is the first ever Congress they held, and it was held, guess where? In Cape Coast. So, the NDC's connection with Cape Coast is important. Now, by this time, no one knew whether Flight Lieutenant Rawlings was going to present himself for election under a political party. A few parties were claiming him. The NDC was claiming him, which was formed by Mrs. Rawlings, essentially. They were claiming him. The Eagle Party, which was formed by his brother Michael Susudis, was claiming him. Then there were other Nkrumah's parties that were set up that were all claiming him. JJ was looking at all of these, but it was irresistible to him, the combination of Nana Kunedu Ajiman Rawlings, Kwame Nahoy, PV Obeng, Totobi Kwache, all of them coming together to form a party and presenting it to him. That was irresistible to JJ. So eventually, JJ joined the NDC, but also asked the NDC to bring the other smaller parties that he loved, like the Eagle Party, on board. So eventually they had an alliance. What you're about to see now is the first ever Congress of the NDC, the National Democratic Congress. It was held in Cape Coast.
Amen. What you have done, son? As I see, I'm number one and son. What could I be asked to go and son? I should have one son. Break you, son. What you go, son? A dear answer. I go answer. I go answer. And now, I did a near minute. Nianzusio and Abam Ghana. Nana Martin said, Nana Maki Tressa, Yakene, Yada, Yasuna, Yasenda, Woman Benaya Riviano, and Obama, Jerry, John, Lawrence. Bama John, what was up? Yama Wansan, Saturday, Wadauruma. And the money my husband way. Some never did him near Mount one watching, not call the Hokoyano, Brabatuaso. Yacha, and you will be there. A cat non can go on your body. And the Amon, and the Abajo, and Diana, while by dinner banana tree, Nana more. When you say no more, when you pop on the floor. So I went Yafo, so I didn't know. And you know, Zuchia was Yano, Mamma no Kwan Boswell, and money to the show.
Here is John Rawlings. Does not need any introduction to either this Congress or the General Electorate of Ghana. Since 1979, and for a period of 13 years, he has led a courageous, constructive, and successful revolution to rescue our dear country from decay and hopelessness. Honorable delegates, with these credentials of the proposed candidate, I can only urge this Congress to unanimously endorse the nominations which have come from the constituencies. Long live the revolution, long live the National Democratic Congress, long live Flight attendant, retired John Rawlings. Long live Ghana.
So NDC people have been celebrating since the members of the diplomatic corps were there. Is that Koin Kensenaka I see there? So if you see them, you can tell me what their names are. This is Koin Kensenaka. Is him? Yes. No, is it him? No, it wouldn't be him. This is Sinari. This is Harry Sawyer. This is Obeda Samoa sitting next to Harry Sawyer. So this is J.H. Oswa Champon and Ohine Jekum. Alaji Hudu Yaya over there. PV Obin. Yes, that's PV Obin. You can't miss that one. Alaji Mama Idrisu and Betty Mold Idrisu. Hey, these are old pictures. So that's JJ appearing at the rally the next day in Cape Coast, still in military gear. JJ was still in military gear when he was going to accept nomination to be a civilian candidate. Alaji Hudu Yaya is with him, the general secretary of the party. This is the first Congress of the NDC. Yeah, JJ hoists the NDC flag. He has accepted the NDC nomination. He is going to be the NDC candidate for the election coming up in 1992 after we have come back to democracy. Nana Kunedu Ajiman Rawlings always whispering to JJ, always whispering to JJ. The two lovebirds have been in love for a very long time. So that's the story. We're just starting, by the way, so hold it there. That's 1992. That's Flight Lieutenant Rawlings accepting the NDC nomination in Cape Coast. So NDC's relationship with Cape Coast, it didn't start now. So after this one, I keep forgetting to turn my scale. Okay, let me. Shouldn't fall. Okay, there you go. All right. So after this, then the issue about NDC coming together with other political parties. You see, before the 1992 election was fought, it wasn't very obvious that NDC was going to win because it was believed across the country that people didn't like JJ. JJ had killed people, and this and that and that and that. Many people underestimated the penetration of the NDC in the rural areas at the time. It was also because there was no media. The plurality of media was not there. So the voices of the opposition was heard in Accra only. And the opposition philosophy did not penetrate across the nation like it does today. So the NDC message had gone down to the people. They had been seeing JJ on state broadcaster Ghana television for 10 years, and they had fallen in love with him. They believed that he was an honest, genuine leader. That was the impression JJ carried, accountability, probity, and all of that. And the NDC adopted this as their mantra as well. So even though the election was going to be a one-sided big victory for Rawlings, before the election, it didn't seem like that. Because of the history in the minds of the older people, they knew that the Nkrumahs were powerful and the Dankwa Buziais were powerful, and that the NDC was a third force, and you heard Obeda Sama talk about that. So to sort of cure this defect, it is believed that there was the idea of Flight Lieutenant Rawlings that would bring some of the Nkrumahs together. And it will surprise you to find out that not all the members of the PNDC believed in forming a new political party. No. There were those who were staunch Nkrumahs, like Captain Kojo Chikata and others, who believed that they should form an Nkrumahs party and float the name of Kwame Nkrumah and use that to defeat the opponents of Nkrumah, who were the Dankwa Buzia people who had already set up Dankwa Buzia Club. So these four men came together and formed a very powerful force in the Nkrumahs. Then I refer to the photograph here. Koin Kensen Aka is here, Roland Atakesen, Reverend Kweku Boateng, and Captain Kojo Chikata. We have to name them as part of the NDC story because they became the alliance that joined the NDC to be able to be successful in the 1992 election. When the results came out, it's clear that without the NCP alliance, the Rawlings would have been successful anyway. But I'm showing you these photographs so that I go back to the story and then you can really understand what happened. So remember these names: Koin Kensen Aka, later to be vice president; Roland Atakesen, famous lawyer, famous Nkrumahist, he passed; Reverend Kweku Boateng, whose son became the first African Deputy Chancellor of the Exchequer in Britain, Lord Paul Boateng, whom you know. His father, Reverend Kweku Boateng, a seasoned politician, was an Nkrumahist. And Captain Kojo Chikata, who was also a very staunch Nkrumahist. Now, these four men came together to form a sort of formidable force on the Nkrumah side, and JJ could not resist to bring them on board along his party. Let's hear the testimony of Faustina Nelson, who tells us how it all happened before Koin Kensen Aka became the running mate of Rawlings in 1992.
Surprisingly, the late Kweku Boateng, who was then the leader and presidential candidate supposedly of the NCP, he became resistant. He was very adamant and insistent on being the presidential candidate, and that he vowed never to play second fiddle to the NDC candidate. That was President Rawlings. So, as an impromptu decision, the seniors of the party, the Ahoys, the Chikatas, the Tetegas, and so on, just resolved. I believe they had this decision in conjunction with the hierarchy of the NDC then. So they brought in Aka, that because it was like Aka would play ball, and that he would agree to be the vice presidential candidate of the Progressive Alliance. The late Aka also started grumbling about, according to him, not being treated well. I remember that a few times that I went to him in his office at the State House, as soon as he saw me, he said, "Hey, Auntie Fosti, now what mama done and put mama to the back?"
Okay, so you sort of getting it, aren't you? So that's Faustina Nelson telling us how Kensington Aka became the story of. I'm trying to get the NDC thing, but okay, the story of Kensington Aka is a story that is well told. We're not going to belabor the point today, but that's Faustina Nelson just fitting in our history. I need to run quickly so that we can finish in good time, and so you can see it on social media in a very good time. Okay, so that was 1992 story. You know, we fast forward. JJ went into the election and he won. There's a story about NDCs that they came in. They were formed as a political party. They drew from other places. You would realize that the NDC did not just draw from the Nkrumahs. They also drew from the Dankwa-Buzia tradition. I don't know whether it was a curious arrangement of JJ, because JJ also had a connection with the Dankwa-Buzia tradition. You know that his father-in-law, J.O.T. Ajiman, had great friends among the Dankwa-Buzia people. So somehow they sort of connected to the Dankwa-Buzia as well. I'll mention to you the names of the people who were with the Dankwa-Buzia who joined the NDC. Dr. Obeda Samoa is one of them. Alhaji Mahama Idrisu is one of them. Alhaji Mahama Idrisu, in his earlier life, was a running mate to the Dankwa-Buzia ticket for the 1983 elections that never was. In 1981, a party was formed called the All People's Party. The All People's Party was a party amalgamation of the Dankwa-Buzia group. It was selected that Victor Owusu would be the presidential candidate for the 1983 election. Alhaji Mahama Idrisu was the running mate selected then before the coup occurred in 1981 December. So Alhaji Mahama Idrisu was from the Dankwa-Buzia tradition. If you observe the NDC up until Potofi, I'm talking about the NDC chairman Potofi, you will find that all their chairmen are drawn from the Dankwa-Buzia. Later on, we were told that it was an arrangement by Rawlings and Harry Sawyer. So first chairman was Isifu Ali from the Dankwa-Buzia tradition, co-chaired by A.A. Munufie from the Dankwa-Buzia tradition. Now Isifu Ali was not the deputy chairman as you wrote. He was the first co-chairman. He and A.A. Munufie were chairman. After that, I believe it came to Kwabena. A.A. Munufie was there for a very long time. He was chairman of NDC for a very long time. After that, he came to Dr. Obeda Samoa, Dankwa-Buzia tradition. After that, he came to Kwabena J, who was also the Dankwa-Buzia tradition. Kwabena J actually was a member of parliament for the PFP, the Popular Front Party of Victor Owusu in 1979. As recently as 79, he was a member of parliament elected for the Biakuya constituency in the then Volta region, now in the Oti region. For the Dankwa-Buzia tradition, the Popular Front Party. So Kwabena J was also a chairman. So up until Potofi, all the chairmen of the NDC have been drawn from the Dankwa-Buzia tradition. And then the backbone, the roots of the NDC have been drawn from the Nkrumahist, and then there's the core NDC people, that's the Keda group. So NDC used to be made of three groups: the Nkrumahist, Kojo Chikata in his group, the Dankwa-Buziais, who will take the position of chairman, and then the Keda group, that's the Rawlings people. We are saying that because as we draw to 2024, we'll make a comment about that. Okay, so that was in 1992. Then came 1996. Okay, so the Kensington Aka problem then meant that he had to leave, and he had this fracas with Rawlings and all that. We're not going to go into that tonight. He had to leave. That's one of the story points of the NDC's history, but that's okay. We can move on. So NDC was successful in 1992 to 1996. They needed a new running mate. Now, they had a Fanti, Kensington Aka, who was the running mate at the time. Flight Lieutenant Rawlins's personal preference for a next running mate was Professor George Bennett, the former Vice Chancellor of the university. And he wrote out it in his book. And he said that he declined the offer, but he would have taken it, and that he supported the NDC. So that documented. They didn't get Professor George Bennett. And then the running mate issue became a problem. Because at that time, they found that other people were interested who the powers that be didn't want. Now, in 1996, the main power blocks who were making the decisions were the Ahoy brothers, who had manned government ministries in 1992 through the PNDC that had become very powerful. Kofi Totobi Kwache was one of those. I asked for photographs of these men. If they get it, they'll put it on. We can talk about it. The Ahoy brothers became very powerful. Kofi Totobi Kwache became one of their people who became very powerful. It was said that they were gradually forming a fancy confederacy. And so they were looking at the future of the party. Because after 1996, Rawlins was not going to be able to run for the 2000 election. So Rawlins was running the last term in 1996. He was being challenged by J. Kufuor, the new MPP candidate. It was unlikely that Mr. Kufuor would win the election. He was elected in October, 3 months to the election. JJ was the incumbent. He has been incumbent 10 years earlier. Now he was still the incumbent. It was unlikely that Kufuor was going to win. So JJ was running his last term. They began a battle for the soul of the NDC presidential slot after JJ had left. Now, these new fancy confederacy people were aware that if they didn't take hold of the succession to Rawlins, that space will be occupied by the cadres. The cadres had a candidate. Their candidate was Augustus Guzitano. He was the candidate of the cadres, for sure. And that was the Kojochi Kata side of things. Now, these other people, the fancy confederacy people, they were looking to take over the place. So they thought that the running mate issue, the running mate position, was going to be an important position for them to fill. That if they could get their own running mate, that running mate could be catapulted to replace Flight Lieutenant Rawlins at the end of Rawlins's term in the year 2000. And that's how it was worked out, and that's how it became. Here is Kwame Ahoy telling us the most dramatic part of the Mills selection.
Harry Sawyer was the Minister of Education, and he brought a memo to Cabinet asking us to reverse the decision of the University Council, and appoint Professor Mills because he was much better. And he extolled his virtues. In the middle of it, somebody told him that in this constitution, the government doesn't appoint the Vice Chancellor, it's the University Council, so it cannot be done. But he was very, very emotional about it. And the more he spoke about it, the more I said, Obeda Samuel was in the meeting, but he left before the meeting ended. So as soon as the meeting ended, I dashed to his office. He was Attorney General at the time. I said, Obed, this Professor Mills that Harry Sawyer was talking about, don't you think he's the person that we are looking for? Obed said, Jesus Christ, Kwamina, you are right. He's brilliant. I taught him. Yes. Why hasn't anybody thought about him? So he called Rawlins on phone, and they spoke in Ewe, which I didn't understand. And then Jerry said, come there. I know the man. I have met him. He's IRS coming. Go to his house. Whatever it takes today.
So you heard that. So that's how it was created. And if I get the photographs, I'll show you who they are. They are Ahoy brothers, Guzi, and all that, and I'll sort of say the stuff about them. Okay, so that's Kwame Ahoy talking about how. Okay, so this is the Ahoy brothers. Let me just quickly do that. So the oldest is Uncle Ato Ahoy. That's him here. Uncle Ato Ahoy on the right-hand side of your screen. Is that what you have? Yes. And then Kwesi Ahoy is the next. And Kwame Ahoy is the third. These are the Ahoy brothers, very formidable, very intelligent group of people, well-trained group of people who became a backbone for the Rawlins philosophy and a backbone for the NDC philosophy. On 29th anniversary of the event, I think that the NDC story cannot be written without the influence of the Ahoy brothers. Very, very influential. We can talk about the end and how Kwame Ahoy has written a book that didn't sit well with the majority of the NDC people at the time that he publishes. But these are people that when we're writing the NDC story, we cannot ignore them. The Ahoy brothers. Let me get the next photograph. Which other one do you have? They'll put it on immediately and then I'll see it as I talk about the story of Kwame Ahoy. So you see that you see what Kwame Ahoy said. That's how Professor Mills came in. So Professor Mills was their own selection, and they created Professor Mills to become the running mate so that they will be able to seize the opportunity after JJ had left. So yes, JJ did leave. or JJ went to the election. That's Professor Mills. We have a lot to say about him tonight later on. So JJ won the election of 1996. And then he was sworn in as president for another 4-year term. So we're focusing on the NDC story. So at this time, JJ is no longer going to be there. Ministers, everybody, business community is jostling around to find out who is going to be the next leader of the NDC after Rawlings. In those days, the MPP was having some turmoil. So the controversies about Nana Akufo-Addo versus Kufuor and all that. I want Guzi Tano's photo if you can get it. JJ. Yeah, that's JJ Rawlings on your screen over there. He was now looking in the horizon as he is right now, and he was not going to be a leader he was not going to be president anymore. He cannot be in 2000. He cannot be on the ballot. The NDC is a powerful force. They had a majority in parliament, and they needed to fill the space. So the jostling had begun. This is the photograph I'm looking for, Guzi Tano. I'm going to talk about Guzi in a way that people can get it. So this man had been prepared to take over from Rawlings. By the time the NDC were beginning to find out that Ghanaians wanted democracy, the philosophy of Captain Chikata and all of those people was that JJ will hand over to Guzi. So Guzi had been very well prepared in terms of his CV. He had been to represent Ghana at the Security Council. He had done international relations. He had been across the world just getting prepared. And you know, in the communist world and the socialist world, that's how they prepared the people. Fidel Castro, Raul Castro, North Korea, they actually prepared their leaders very well. Guzi had undergone that kind of global preparation to make him ready to take over from Flight Lieutenant Rawlings. So by the calculation of that group of people, Guzi Tano was going to be on the NDC ballot in 2000 as the presidential candidate, young man, fresh blood, and win the election and smash out the MPP forever and ever. Because if the MPP loses a third election in 2000, really, nobody was going to take them serious. They lost 92, they lost 96. It was looking like NDC can never win an election. If you read Sam Jones' book, he talks about how it looked like the MPP can never win the election. And so even when his brother convinced him that he should give Kufuor some money, he didn't want to give Kufuor some money. I'm talking about Sam Jones' book. It's there. I'll bring it to you one of these days. Sam Jones wrote that he gave Mills some money and he was not sure that the MPP was going to be able to win, because at that time, the narrative was that the MPP cannot win the election. They can defeat NDC. That's how it looked like. 97, 98, 99, that's how it looked like, that MPP can never defeat MPP in any, NPP can never defeat NDC in any election. Guzi was the guy they thought about. Okay, let's move on with the story. So it didn't become. On one fateful event, and this is an event, and I like JJ's photograph, if you can give it to me. This was an event, JJ and Mills, please. This was an event that punctuated the history of the NDC. The ramifications of that event continue till now. It was at an event in Swedru where Flight Lieutenant Rawlings had gone to address a rally. And in addressing the rally, I think Kwame Nahoe captures it in his book. In addressing the rally, Rawlings had been told that it is time for him to introduce a successor. So the successor was not going to be introduced by a Congress conversation or a Congress voting like they do these days. The successor was going to be introduced by an anointing. JJ was supposed to anoint him as the next leader. And JJ was sort of convinced at this crucial event in Swedru in 1998, towards the end of 1998. And he went out there and he announced that his vice president, Professor J.E.A. Mills, will become the next leader of the NDC. And everybody, constellations, the media carried it out. The masterminds who were behind this had achieved their aim. They had gotten their man named by Rawlings to the whole world, to the whole public. Everybody had listened. That's where the agitations began. The cadres who had slaved for the party all this time and believed that Guzi, their leader, their man, was going to take over from Rawlings, and the cadres were going to take control of the backbone of the NDC, they were shattered because the masterminds, Kwame Nahoe, Totobi Kwache, Kwesi Ahoy, they had designed this beautifully. They are the masterminds. They had masterminded this event and gotten J.J. Rawlings to announce Professor Mills ahead of everything, ahead of every preparation, to the shock of many of the NDC rank and file, that J.E.A. Mills was going to be the candidate of the party. So that's J.E.A. Mills in your shot. So all of that started. And then J.E.A. Mills became the candidate of the party. He went into the 2000 election and he lost the 2000 election to J.A. Kufuor at the time. And before the 2000 election, this announcement by Rawlings in the Swedru Declaration was a big deal. Now that announcement got Guzi Tano and others to leave the NDC. The first major breakaway from a major political party in the history of Ghana since independence was occasioned in the 29-year history of the NDC. It was Guzitano, Peter Podugbe, Chichiropoku, Mijebano, Mr. Gariba. They and some of the rank and file broke away from the NDC, and they announced that they have formed a new party. The party was called the National Reform Party, and the National Reform Party was going to contest the 2000 election. And guess who the leader of the National Reform Party was? Augustus Guzi Tano. That's the story of the NDC. This story, the ramifications of this story has not ended. As I go through, you see the story running through all the time. Professor Mills innocently comes in, through no fault of his people mastermind him and put him in, and then, bam, that's what happens. So NDC goes to the election, and the election is lost. J. Kufuor wins. Okay, it comes as a surprise to many Ghanaians that J. Kufuor has won the election, so he wins it anyway. And then J. Kufuor governs, so we're jumping that because we're dealing with the NDC story. I'm not going to talk much about J. Kufuor. J. Kufuor governs, and then election 2004 come up. Professor Mills is a candidate again. Okay, so Guzitano is still not a member of the party. He's gone away. Cheche Opoku is not a member of the party. He's gone away. Now, these names I mentioned, Guzi, Cheche, Peter Podugbe, they were stalwarts of the National Democratic Congress. They were the people who managed the NDC's electoral victories. They were the people who were in charge of social mobilization of the young people. Peter Podugbe was in charge of national service. And those days, national service was a big deal because there were two streams of national service persons. Those who had finished university and those who had finished the old sixth form. You finish sixth form before you go to university, you do 1 year national service. So all that group of people, 19 years to 20 years, millions of them were in the Peter Podugbe's hands. And then their seniors, 24 years, 23 years, who had finished university, another million where Peter Podugbe was running the national service show. He was very powerful. David Kanye was his deputy. Guzi was their man. Cheche Opoku, and then Peter left the NDC. Very articulate man, and he left the NDC to form the Reform Party. He was the chairman of the Reform Party. Guzi Tano was the presidential candidate. Cheche Opoku was the secretary of the Reform Party. Mijebano was their spokesperson. So I'll get their photographs for you next time. I think we were in a hurry. We couldn't get all these photographs. You see it next time. So Kufuor comes in 2000 and wins the election, runs the show. 2004, Mills comes back. Okay. So I left one thing out. When Professor Mills became, and I'm leading to another strand of the NDC breakaway, I'm talking about Obed Asamoah now. When Mills became the candidate, his choice for running mate also became a contest. So the likes of Obed Asamoah and others who believed in the Reform Party, or who sort of agreed or had friends with the Reform Party, did not join the Reform Party because it's believed that Obed was sure that he would become Professor Mills's running mate. So Obed began to machinate. You know, Obed is also another mastermind. He began to design the system to become Professor Mills's running mate. As a reporter at the time, I was given a story that Obed Asamoah was going to be Mills's running mate. I put up the story that Obed Asamoah was going to be Mills's running mate in the speculation that was being done then. I put up the story in November 2000, and in November 2000, that's how many years? 20 years ago. I did that story as a student journalist. I put the story up. I interviewed everybody who was concerned with Obed Asamoah, and Joy FM published the story in my newsroom. I won an award for that story in 2001 as a news reporter of the year because Professor Odrigajepo, the award giver, was excited by the depth of research I had done to come about that story. So I was hoping that Obed would be named the running mate because I'd done the story 2 whole months to the time. I spoke to my news editor, and they thought that it was too early, and I said I'm sure that Obed was going to be, so they should allow me to do the story. I put the story out 2 whole months to the time. When the announcement came on a Sunday evening, it was Martin Amidu, the special prosecutor. He had become the running mate to Professor Mills, and Professor Mills was not, Obed Asamoah was not happy with that. He was never happy with that. That's what began the thought about Obed Asamoah becoming chairman of the party and eventually leaving the party when he got angry. His first time of getting angry with the party is when the machinations of the other mastermind took him away from the list as Professor Mills's running mates, and Martin Amidu became the running mates. Because in Kwame Nkrumah's book, you will see that he said J.J. Rawlings had said that Obed should be the running mate. Professor Mills, Ahoy talks about it in his book. Okay, so we are not just pulling it from the sky. Let's move on quickly. We've done too much time, and we are still on 2004. Okay, 2004 came in Mohamed Mumuni. Okay, not much to say. I think I have to gloss over. Mohamed Mumuni is also part of the NDC story. He was the running mate in 2004, and journalists remember the strange story of one night, Mohamed Mumuni having had a car crash somewhere in Legon 2 months to the election. Maybe it affected the fortunes of Mills, maybe it didn't. But Mohamed Mumuni was the running mate 2004. And in 2008, Mohamed Mumuni was changed. The story about election 2008 is a story about John Dramani Mahama. Now, this is the 2008 story of the 29 years history of the NDC. I tell you, in 2008, Professor Mills, and it's in Kwame Nahoy's book, it's in Obeda Samuel's book, Professor Mills was determined to repeat Mohamed Mumuni as his running mate. That's what Professor Mills wanted to do. He was determined to repeat Mohamed Mumuni as his running mate. However, the pressure came upon him that this is an election that could be won. The MPP are having 17 people contesting for elections. Nana Akufo-Addo and 16 others are contesting for elections. There's going to be division in their party. It looks like Nana Akufo-Addo is going to win. It looks like President Kufuor doesn't like that. There's going to be division in their party. Let's have a candidate that can win this election for us. So people came in and they told Professor Mills that John Mahama should be your running mate. And that if John Mahama is your running mate, the election can be won. And so that started. And we all remember Elvis Efria had to announce for Professor Mills because there was too much tension on the announcement day for Professor Mills to be there to do the announcement. So in a hall in Accra that was rented by the NDC to deliver the announcement of the running mate, the presidential candidate didn't show up. Elvis Efria showed up and announced John Dramani Mahama as the running mate for the NDC. So 2008 is a story about John Mahama. Can I have John Mahama here instead, please? 2008, yes, it's a story about John Mahama. So John Mahama came in and it was expected that he was going to change the fortunes of the NDC because everyone believed that Professor Mills versus Nana Akufo-Addo was going to be an easy kill for Akufo-Addo, that Akufo-Addo was going to win the elections. All the international polls projected Akufo-Addo to win the elections until the John Mahama candidacy came up. Now, who is John Dramani Mahama? So, John Mahama is the candidate that came into the politics of 1998. At that time, the NDC was very brutal and very brutish, even in terms of their communication, because everyone was afraid of Rawlings, and Rawlings didn't like the opposition. He manifestly hated the opposition, and any NDC person who tried to sort of, as we call it, be nice to the opposition, Rawlings was against him. John Mahama stood out of that group as a person who could speak his mind, even if it wasn't good. He stood out of that group as a person who was able to communicate to the young people. He stood out of that group as a deputy minister of communication who was youngish about everything. And so somehow the media, anytime they wanted to speak to NDC or speak about NDC, your first port of call was John Mahama's office. And he would listen to every media. I mean, in those days, you can't go to New York, Adamafiu, interior minister, that you're a journalist from Joy FM, you want an interview, they'll arrest you, cry. They'll beat you up. They are not doing that. NDC ministers don't do that. In 2019-99, you don't just go and no, they don't do that. Today is fine. They were not doing that in those days. So John Mahama was the only one that you could go to. He was the one that he was a deputy minister for communication. He was the one that everybody talked to, even sports journalists. When they wanted to speak to E.T. Mensah, the sports minister, they would go and speak to John Mahama first. And John Mahama would call E.T. and say, "Oh, Charlie, I beg, this guy wants to say something to you. Can can I bring him to your office? I beg. I've spoken to him. He will conduct himself well." And then you go and see E.T. Mensah. When you are a sports journalist, you want to talk to the sports minister, you go through John Mahama. You are a security reporter, you want to speak to the interior minister, you go through John Mahama. You are whatever, you want to speak to anybody in the NDC, you go through John Mahama. Rawlings's castle was inaccessible. Nana Atudazi was the chief of staff. We got to know that Nana Atudazi was chief of staff years after he had left. We didn't even know there was anybody there called chief of staff. Valerie Saki was there. Joyce Abebio was there. Valerie Saki and Joyce Abebio are British women. They were in Rawlings's castle. Rawlings's castle was totally inaccessible to journalists except the graphic editor, Elvis Ayer, who had his office in there. The graphic editor was there. So this is John Mahama. I'm giving you the story behind the NDC narrative. So that's how John Mahama comes in. So when the election is lost, John Mahama is in parliament, And then he sort of does well in Parliament. He's representing Bole Bamboy. It's a safe seat, so he's always going to win. So approaching 2008, some NDC people think that, look, if we really have to break the back of this NDC culture, that we don't like journalists, we are like this, we are brutish, we need somebody on the ticket who demonstrates that. And so forget about Mohamed Mumuni, because Professor Mills was insisting on Mohamed Mumuni. Bring in a John Dramani Mahama. Now, this idea was mooted by not J.J. Rawlings, but the masterminds. Totobi Kwache, Kwame Nahoy, Atoy. They masterminded this analysis and sold it to Professor Mills. Because J.J. at that time wanted a woman. J.J. thought that Betty Moldidrisu would be the best running mate to partner John Mahama to win 2008. To partner Professor Mills to win 2008. Other people thought other things. I remember the famous statement that Mills made after John Mahama had been elected. Mills said that everybody had their camp. There's a Mills camp, and there's a this camp, there's a Rawlings camp, and there's another camp. What about the Mills camp? Mills asked the journalist that question. The Mills camp was animated by the philosophy of Kwame Na and Ato Ahoy and Kwesi Ahoy, and they produced John Mahama as the running mate. Hindsight shows us that it was a good decision. If you look at the results of the 2008 election, it's not a result that you will say that the NDC, as an opposition party, were definitely going to win. No, that's not like that. In fact, the NDC were going to lose. Something happened for the NDC to win. The NDC were going to lose. Let's look at the results again. Put the results there. This is the first round results. 2008, first round. Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. Have a look at that. 49.5%. He was looking for 25,000 votes to win the election as president of Ghana, in spite of everything that had happened. The MPP had lost parliament. Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo runs in as 49.5%. Professor J.E.A. Mills, opposition leader, 2 terms in opposition. This is after 8 years of the MPP administration. MPP comes with a new candidate. Professor Mills lagging behind, 47.6%. That's the election results of 2008 that sometimes the analysts forget. This is how it looked like. Nana Addo, 49.5%. So this was not an election that NDC were going to win. This is an election that the NDC was going to lose. But something happened. We believe that one of the reasons why Professor Mills rose up to 47% was the running mate John Mahama, who galvanized the youth, especially in the urban areas in Accra, who was wearing his jeans shirt and talking pidgin English and looked like an affable guy. It was John Mahama that delivered the victory. And that has been the problem of the NDC till now. There's still questions being asked in the NDC, who delivered the victory? Okay, I get a signal that we're going off Metro TV now. I'm sorry, Metro TV viewers, I think we are getting to the juiciest part of the conversation. We have to go off Metro TV now, and we continue on Facebook. So for our viewers on Metro TV, good night. You can see it on Facebook tomorrow. Our viewers on Facebook, voila, we are on. Let's continue with the analysis. Okay, so the point I'm making here as the author of this analysis is that in 2008, the NDC were not going to win this election. The MPP were going to, Nana Akufo-Addo was going to win this election. The MPP had lost the parliamentary election anyway. They had lost by 2, so they had lost the parliamentary.
Metro TV, insightful and inspiring moments.